Welcome to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist of Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I am joined today by Zach Slingsby. He is with Human Factor Media. Zach, thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, Eric, what's going on?
Not much. It looks like you're in Atlanta, but I don't actually think you are. Where does this find you in the world?
I'm in Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville, Tennessee. All right, nice. Well, so talk to me a little bit about Human Factor Media. What is your company? What do you guys focus on?
Sure. We're primarily a branded content company. You know, that's probably the way that we're going. That's probably a narrow term. We probably now, I'd say, engage just in broad digital storytelling, broad video storytelling. We're working on some scripted shows, some non-scripted that are longer form. Branded content, as we understand it, typically means things that will come from a branded platform, shows or digital video that'll come from a branded platform that are not advertisements, they're not commercials.
Okay.
So they'll be a narrative video, web series, a docuseries, some comedy videos in some cases. So they would have a narrative structure, and the purpose of them would not be explicitly to sell a product. The purpose of them would be to entertain an audience. So that's kind of our foundation. We've been around about 6 years. We're based between Nashville and New York. We have production teams in both cities, and we got to work for some great brands and publishers, including Planet Fitness and LG, Adidas, New York Post. We do comedy shows for. We just became a vendor for Bleacher Report, Barron's. What these projects probably have in common, a lot of them are very different work, but they all tend to have a narrative through line. They all tend to be something that we're brought in to figure out, how can we make this captivating and compelling from a viewer perspective.
Okay. And so how did you get into this world? So growing up, did you want to tell stories and do videos?
Not videos necessarily. Writing was always telling and writing. Really, literary writing was my first kind of foray into this avenue. I guess I felt, I would always, from very young, I would write stories and would, I didn't know, to me, it wasn't clear what kind of a job that could ever be. And I think a lot of people find, and so I always did it, and I just did it because I loved it, and I still do it because I love it. But I just, it was very unclear what application that would have in the actual marketplace. And I guess I got a Master of Fine Arts program after college, concentrated in fiction. And I had some literary success when I was younger. I had published a number of short stories, and I got a literary agent at a very young age. I wrote a novel. And then I sort of saw that was going to be a weekly or daily grind to become even mildly successful in an industry that a lot of people really don't care about. I mean, it's so hard to people didn't read when I was growing. Now, the idea that anyone's going to read a book is crazy.
Yeah.
I think 97% of books sell less than 500 copies or something like those things. Some crazy, less than 1,000 copies. And I think it's 6 to 8% of the population actually actively buys new fiction.
Huh.
6-8, not 68.
That's crazy. I guess I'm in that. I love it. I'm still, that's a big thing. There's a bookstore that just opened near us recently that sells both new and used books, and I go in and just pile up the books. So yeah.
I'm the same way. I know a lot of other people are the same way, but I do think that we're, in the minority. I don't know, in Pennsylvania you ask, some people have promising statistics, but everything that I've read has been pretty grim. And so anyway, long story short, I still write. I love to write fiction. I still write, but I don't, I kind of found this plug into this modern world, which is a utility that a lot of brands seem to be relying on, which is, we have a certain audience, we have a certain group of people that we want to pay money to get in touch with, and how do we do that, and what's a way to do it that's not coercive, that's not the commercials you would have seen in the 90s. What's a way to do it that feels like it's a native part of their digital experience?
So where was the first opportunity to do that? Like, did you have a friend who was
in production? I had a friend who worked for production of Forbes, and I was like, I think this could be, I think I could do this. And he was like, I don't think you can do that. And Because like a lot of people were like, this is a lot, this is a big undertaking. And it was. And it really took like a year or 2 years before I really had any competency with it and could get clients and feel comfortable that we were going to deliver a good product. So yeah, there's a lot of trial and error just because there's so many moving parts. When you write a story alone, I don't know how interesting this is to anybody, but also when you write a story alone, it's just...
So my first love is writing. So I'm interested. Okay. So there we go. How about that?
Right? Where was that? Where was the in the fiction or nonfiction or what?
So in 7th grade, I wanted to be an English teacher. Now I also knew how to program computers. And so my family was like, you should probably program computers. And I ended up going to school for that, but was really bored. And I came to writing. I've written for Inc. I did 160 to 180 articles for them. And I published a book in 2013, which probably talked about 500 people, maybe 50 people read it. But it's a book about user research. And I have another one that I want to write. So I kind of live in the world of nonfiction, but with a fiction base. I love storytelling that then gets you to a point. It's a nonfiction point, right? So the Malcolm Gladwells and the whatever of the world, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
I love that. It's so cool. Yeah, it's people don't know when they're immersed in storytelling. They just know, they know that they want to keep going with the experience. So it's such a hidden art.
Yeah.
So cool. So I'm gonna check that out. But yeah, it's very. I don't know. What do you think? I feel like lately we've been coming to this with all these various projects that we're doing. We want them all to be successful, but really for us, selfishly, the fun is in the journey of the work. It's in the execution. It's in the acts and the. What do you feel?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's about failing forward, right? Yeah. So and telling stories or putting things out there. I'm working with a client right now and they're just so hung up on perfection. And I'm like, come on, let's get a thing out there and experiment for a little bit. Cause who knows? I mean, I remember the first time I saw the show, The Office, I thought it was the worst show I'd ever seen in my life. Right. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, who would ever watch this? And then as you in retrospect look back, it was something that we had to kind of get used to. It was a different way of doing it, that kind of thing. And
that's
really new genre, right?
That's so we didn't have any way to map it yet.
Yeah.
And everybody felt that way. This is a little weird. There's no laugh track. What's going on? They're moving the camera a lot. Michael's so awkward. He can be kind of a dick sometimes. What is the deal here? You're right. And then it's muscle memory. And then you're like, this is a brilliant show.
Yeah, and then you had Parks and Rec came right behind it that had a similar feel to it, that high kind of mockumentary concept. So it's that experimentation, and those of us that do the storytelling or think about it that way, because you need something unique. You don't want the same story. You and I have both probably picked up a book and you kind of already know the end when you get a couple chapters into it. So anyway, so back to you. So you're doing the Forbes thing. Forbes was the first one that kind of
No, you just worked for Forbes.
Okay.
And he was our video production guy. But I want to just something you said was so interesting. So I was just thinking about this too, because, a lot of creative people have so many good ideas, and I feel a victim to this too, which is you have lists of ideas on your notepad, that you're so good, and you just feel like if I just, but then you make the mistake of sharing them or asking someone else's feedback or something, and it's the worst thing to do. And I think it's what you're saying. It's The Office is a great example. No one can really help you. They can only say, there's a couple people that are just blindly optimistic, and that's probably a great quality to have. But other than that, most people are just I don't know. I don't really get it. Are you sure you're going to, no one assumes they could ever iterate or get any better. No one assumes that, maybe they're bringing some baggage to it, that they're not seeing it totally clearly. And then you push it through, and it's just amazing that it can become something real and something better and something crystallized. And I just think that what you're talking about is such a problem that definitely kept me in captivity with a lot of ideas for years.
Well, it's every idea at the beginning is kind of bad, right? It's, it's kind of well, it's out there, but I'm not quite sure what it is yet. And it's about massaging it and moving it along and, trying to get it to the next step and those types of things. And we as a society are taught, instant, everything's instant because we get everything instant. I can have groceries show up in the next hour if I want. Food can show up and so that suffering for the long-term benefit of this, and writing not looked at the same way as drawing something or creating whatever, has that same process. Your first paragraphs are terrible. And then you go back and you're okay, now I can form this and make it. And people I don't think they have they haven't been taught to suffer through the process.
Yeah, it's so. You ever read Ian McEwan, who wrote English novelist?
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite writers. He said that a novel begins as a set of feelings.
Yeah.
And if you wrap words around them too quickly, you're going to suffocate what it is that made you want to create the book. And I think that's so true because it's very vague. And so when you're working on a new idea, you're trying to transmit this vague thing to someone else, and they're like, you see it, you know what it is.
Right.
They couldn't possibly. They're like, all right, it's going to be about friendship that could be good. What do you mean? It's all trapped in this ether that we don't really understand ourselves yet. Anyway, but
have you read Stephen King's book on writing?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I anyone who ever tells me they want to get better at writing, I tell them to read that book. Now, the first
great book.
Yeah, first part of it is his like theory and practice, and then he talks about his first not his first fiction book and how he got it out there. So there's just a lot of that, even though it's a book about fiction that's appropriate to any kind of writing. Like the letting it settle, like letting it sit, coming back to it. And I talk with people too about the writing process. Anyone who's ever told me they hated writing a book hated the editing process. Like if they're like, I wrote a book and I hated it, they didn't like getting the feedback from their editor. I loved it because the editor would come back and be like, I don't understand what you're saying in this paragraph. I'm like, thank you. Like I can go fix that now. You don't know it because you're trying to get the idea, and you think you've translated it because you filled in the gaps in your head. So anyway.
He has a great line in there that goes to what you're saying. It's when you're writing, you're telling yourself the story.
Yeah. And
when you're rewriting, you're taking out everything that is not the story. And so when you go through it and you're like, I had some motive for putting this in there, but now it's totally extraneous. And I think that was really good. There's a lot of great pearls in there. It's short, it's captivating. It's a great book.
Yeah. Back to what you do at Human Factor Media. So when you have someone engage with you guys, they're coming in because they've tried something traditional, or they're willing to go off and experiment and try something that's more of a storytelling. Like, how do they decide that they're going to work the way that you guys do?
Sure. Yeah. It goes a lot of different ways. Oftentimes we connect because they have their clients that have very traditional video needs. And they will talk with us, and, we'll start by saying, well, let's make these that you need to make for sure. And then have you thought about doing something that might have a chance of, getting a little more, let's say organic, traffic or something like that. And then we'll usually present ideas. Most of our engagements start with us bringing in a deck of concepts that we think would be very well suited to this brand, this audience, this kind of mission statement. It can be a matter of some brands will say right away, like we have our top of the we have our funnel clickbait videos, and we want something that's going to be the story.
Yeah.
And that's the best because we can start out, the middle of the chapter and just start working together to come up with something really creative. And then honestly, sometimes the publisher relationships we have and some of the other work that we're doing now, it's not directly brand affiliated. It's just entertainment, right? So like we do comedy shows for the New York Post. That's pure entertainment. It's just how do we make the best thing we can make?
Right.
Same with the stuff we're trying to do with Bleacher right now. So we'll it's an evolution, but I think most brands are in this place where they think they should do something besides run commercials.
Perfect. I love that. So we're going to go to commercial break and come back. And how does a company know they need to do something other than commercials? And then I want to talk about the journey of convincing them to, right? Because companies come to us all the time. Like, we want to do something brave. And then you show them what brave is. And they're like, maybe not that brave, man. Right. So, all right. So we're talking to Zach Slingsby. He's with Human Factor Media. You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger, and we will be back in just a second.
The Claw podcast is brought to you by Liger Partners. Liger Partners is a premier marketing firm where we save the world from boring, broken marketing. We get underdogs recognition because you deserve it. For more information, go to ligerpartners.com and follow us on all social media platforms at Liger Partners.
And we're back. You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. I'm talking today with Zach Slingsby. He is with Human Factor Media, and he works in that world where you don't want to do an ad anymore. You want to maybe tell a story. You want to do something more interesting, things that people are going to pay attention to. So, Zach, when you have a client come in and either they've commissioned you to do maybe the boring thing, or they intentionally say, hey, you want to do something brave, Like, talk to me about that story. Like, how do you decide what is brave, and do you convince them along the way? Like, what are some of those war stories you've had in that space?
It's usually considered experimental, in their budget line.
Okay.
For experiment. And, and but oftentimes, look, we've had more no's than yeses by a lot, right? Like, we'll have the meetings, we'll have the pitch deck, and they'll say, we want this, could be good, could be interesting, but the product's not very central, and we're, Eric, I'm sure, in your work.
100%. And then they're always afraid. I'm like, don't be afraid. We get told, everybody tells us our stuff sucks every day, right? Like, literally, every time we send something over, like, we're fine. We wear Teflon. We're fine.
Yeah, I know. There's a definitely culture of fear, and that can be a big obstacle. But then, there also, people are aware, they live their lives as consumers, and they're aware of what they will watch and what they will not watch.
Yeah.
And most things fit into the skip ad category. 90-something% of YouTube pre-rolls are skips after the 5-second marker is up. So you have they're aware that they also know that the competition for anyone's attention is so incredibly intense, and they just we have this weird brands, especially if they're selling digitally, especially if they have a direct to consumer product, but also the B2B. Also B2B, we have a number of great B2B clients, and they're also kind of in the same boat. They're trying to reach decision makers in a very crowded, noisy environment. And so they can run sales videos the same way a direct-to-consumer brand can run, product video, right? And they can do it on digital channels. And there's this conundrum where, on one hand, it's never been easier to reach the type of person you want to reach. We can get a certain price CPM, and we can micro-target and cookie them up and follow and chase them. So that's a historical anomaly. We get right in front of them at a moment's notice, and we're very good at that. At the same exact time, it's never been harder to get someone to care about what you have to say.
Yeah.
Because the decibel level is so completely overwhelming. And we have a certain percentage of the population just has inherent banner blindness, don't really even notice. A friend of mine said last night, where I was at my buddy's house, he said, "Oh, I don't get ads on Twitter." And we said, "Everybody." It's like, no, I don't. And everybody, you get him, take out your phone. And he just doesn't even notice this. He doesn't, he thought he had some premium plan.
I'm paying for the special plan that gets, yeah, right.
Exactly. So advertising is definitely in an existential crisis. I think there's a lot of good data on that. We don't really know how to sell our products. We can sell them. You shouldn't say that. We have a lot of really great tactics and tricks and protocols, but we're usually very happy with a very low click-through rate and a very low conversion rate. And that's just the industry standard. And so what we're kind of saying is, look, keep doing that. Everyone needs ads. Everyone needs to find a way to sell their stuff. But we also think that there's this kind of grander way to try to captivate an audience. And it's by making content that's inherently disinterested. It's not trying to coerce them. It's not trying to sell them. It's trying to invite them in. Yeah. Trying to grant, it's more permission marketing, maybe you would say, than disruption marketing.
Yeah, I talk about visceral reaction. I'm like, marketing should cause a visceral reaction. Either I need to hate it, love it, make me cry, make me sad, make me angry, do something. But like, don't just do, like, if you're gonna do it, like, it's boring, right? Like, if it's just boring, our company's mission statement is saving the world from boring, broken marketing. Right. B2B marketing is either boring or broken or both. It's typically both. And so when we can get them to do something, it interests them. You talking about like showing them the idea and, getting them to pay attention. We were doing a logo redesign for a client, and we have this like long bar in the logo, and we were showing it to the executives. This was an acquisition, and they were trying to decide what they wanted their logo to be. For 15 minutes, those executives sat in a room and talked about this like long bar in the logo. It's like, why is that bar there? Like, what would we do with it? Now, they were telling us they didn't like the logo, right? They're like, we don't like this logo. And I'm like, well, why? And they're like, well, the long bar, and I don't understand it. They went on and on and on for 15 minutes. And I'm like, for 15 minutes, you have talked about that logo. You haven't talked about any of the other logos. So maybe we should use that logo. That's the one people are going to pay attention to, because they're going to ask all these questions, right? Yeah. And so sussing out like what story you're going to tell. Like, is this like a creative process internally? Like you kind of just go through and have like, how do you get to what you're going to pitch back?
We create a deck of ideas, and it's the same process that you have. It's, what we click on, what we will watch, what sounds most like it could maybe one day iterate into a show that could be on a streamer, on a Netflix or Hulu. What would be something that people would actually want to watch? That's our thing, make a video people want to watch. And it's,
make video people want to watch it. I like that. Yeah, I would watch this. That's great.
Tagline. Yeah. So it's a very, it's an ideation process. But what I'm thinking as you're telling that story with the logo, the claw.
Yeah.
What's up with that name? Where'd you come up with that name?
Well, it's a couple of things. One is my name is Holtzclaw. So it's like, which it's so funny because basically we've called it the claw now for a period of time. And someone in the company asked the same question. It was like, why do we call it the claw? Well, the company's Liger, right? So Ligers have claws. So that makes sense. And then I'm Eric Holtzclaw. And so it's the claw. So that way it's also something we can use extensively. So if we decided to change what we talked about or whatever, it could always stay underneath the claw banner because it kind of fits both of those. And when my book came out, I had a couple people call me. It came out at the same time Simon Sinek's Why stuff did.
Yeah.
And I talk a lot about why, but in a different way. So like Simon Sinek has one kind of focus on why, and then I have another. And I had a couple people would use the moniker Dr. Claw as part of that because I was always
great
talking about what that was.
Well, it's a visceral word.
Yeah.
It stands. Yeah. It's got, you see it and it's relevant, and you start to say, well, what could be the subjects that come out of a show that's named that? And it's fascinating. I've been on a number of these, and I'm not trying to. They're all great, right? But the names are indistinguishable.
Right.
Indistinguishable. And so usually like Marketing Today with marketing, branding, content, or whatever. It's always like the name. It's not everybody's name. It's not everybody's job to come up with a very interesting name for a podcast. I'm not trying to say that it is, but it's just, it does. When I saw the email, I was like, oh, this feels like more texture already before I even know it. See the show.
We were talking last week, we went to a company event, and there's a proposal on the books, which I'm all about, of getting like one of those claw machines that they use having it pick the topic. Wouldn't that be?
Oh, that's awesome.
So like
that'd be great.
Yeah, so you put a bunch of marketing topics into a thing, and then either do rapid fire questions off of it, or use it as the way to start the show. Like, today we're going to talk about display advertising, right?
I work that in. Got to get it in.
So future for you. So there's a lot of, right now as it relates to content creation, and I talk about, AI it helps create, but it can't curate. It will never be a curator because it doesn't have feelings and emotions and things like that. So like we're hearing about AI as it relates to video and all kinds of things. What do you see the impact being in your industry or space? Do you see an impact? Like what's your consideration of that, or any of the trends that are kind of coming out in the space now?
In writing, I see the application immediately and drastically. Like, I know people, I have friends, I have clients who are working with a very professional writer for a high rate right before Chat GPT, and then right afterwards they're not. And that was an immediate blow to people who are, who have real skill sets and real talents. And to your point about the feelings and the emotions and the effects, and do they have the human intuition? No, they probably don't. And I think, but what a lot of people are doing is the CMO is saying, look, I could spend whatever, $5,000-$6,000 a month, having someone write these things, and then I have to do some version of editorial on them anyway. Or I could do the Chat GPT, take it out, and I'll put in the human factor myself. And some people are doing that. Now, I don't know. It's so early. Who knows what's going to happen? It's very hard to predict these things. But this is version 1.0, and it's only going to iterate. It's only going to get stronger. The writers' strike, which has had effects on some of our, tangential effects. We're an independent company, so it doesn't affect us directly. But yeah, I know a lot of people who it did affect. And one of the things they put in was the studio executives have to promise not to use AI for anything ever. Right? And it's a hard promise to make.
It's a hard promise to make.
And I'm a writer. I empathize with them, very much. But it's just it's really weird to know what's going to happen. I spoke about this with someone else recently on a podcast I was just on. But you pick out some of your favorite novels, and it's very hard for me to imagine that AI could ever get to a point where they write that level of the human experience. Because what a great novel does, think about Dostoevsky or Faulkner or, Virginia Woolf or Mark Twain, they're giving you back some part of your life that you told anybody about.
Right.
And yet now they know it and they're giving to you. It's not an intuitive thing. It's a very mystical process. And so it's very hard for me to understand that computer generated software is ever going to find a way to regurgitate that level of human depth. But that's, I'm optimistic and I'm idealistic. It got further than I thought it would so far. So I really don't know.
Yeah, I live for both that in a book. I also live for like the well-written paragraph or line. You read that one sentence and you're like, I wish I had written that sentence.
That's great.
Like you get done and then you go back and read it 4 times because you're like, I am so envious of that one.
Who are the writers? I don't want to get too sidetracked, but who's giving you that feeling the most from writing?
Reading the book Where the Crawdads Sing, there's a couple paragraphs in that book and it's I was on a beach trip and somebody at the store recommended that I read it, and I went through and there's a couple of things that she writes that you're just like, wish I had written that, right? And then some of the classics like that you go through and think about them too. You'll find typically in a book, it's like typically one sentence. You're like, it's an amazing sentence, right? And those of us that like to write, it's I can't believe they drew that picture or they took that photo. It's a kind of our kind of practice area. What I'm interested, I'm a technologist at heart, and so having watched the internet and e-commerce and social media and some of those kind of things like impact, we can't stop it, right? There's just no way to stop it. It's how you embrace it and understand where it applies and know that the human, element of this is always the piece that makes it click, makes it actually. So I see it as I think it's going to improve some of the other things that we've had around us, like the tools that we use for automation, because I honestly don't think I'm a very good Google searcher. Like if I go to Google and try to search for something, I never really get back what I want. But if I use an AI tool, I almost always get back the thing I'm looking for. So research and some of those components, I see it as a really strong enabler. So anyway, so for you and the company, what are some of the things that you see? Like what's next for you?
I think we're going to continue to expand this scope of the projects that we're doing with these publishers. A lot of them need a lot more content, so I think that's a good kind of flywheel approach for us. I think on the other side of it, we have some longer form shows that we're trying to sell right now with sales agents and talent managers at various platforms and distributors. We made a number of short films. We made some scripted web series. I think we'll probably try to do a feature film in the next few years. I don't know, but I think that's on the horizon. I think it's a lot of things would have to fall into place to let us focus on that. Right now, we're not really equipped to step back long enough to do that, but I think it's on the list. And then I think we're doing a couple of projects here in Nashville that I'm really excited about. One in the music business, one in sketch comedy that we just finished a pilot of. We're trying to launch that as a show. And we have this small percentage of the business that is determined by us that we drive forward and invest in and try to make happen and try to get people to kind of understand what we're doing and pick up on it. But other than that, we're very reactive. Clients come to us or we find them and they'll say, here's what we want to do. Here's the box, and then where's the creativity in the box? And so it's very hard from that perspective to assess our month to month because it can always vary widely, which is part of the great thing about it.
Project based, yes, understood. Well, it's been great talking with you. I've been talking today with Zach Slingsby. He's with Human Factor Media. We'll put all the information on how to get to him in our show notes. You've been listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. And until next time.